A runaway train is a thankfully rare thing. In fact, with the safety systems in place on modern trains, it's actually pretty hard to get a train to run away. But that's not always been the case. I'd like to take you back to 1924, to Totteridge and Whetstone on what's now the Northern Line of the London Underground. It wasn't the Northern Line back then. Back then, in fact, it was a branch line of the London and North Eastern Railway, and not a very well-liked one. While electric trains were popping up all over the London suburban network, the branch line to High Barnet remained resolutely steam-hauled. The service was slow and unreliable. The London and North Eastern Railway, or LNER, had taken the branch over from the Great Northern Railway in 1923, and although they had initially promised electrification, they were dragging their feet due to a lack of money. The best they could offer was some new-ish tank engines to haul the trains. One passenger complained to the Times in 1927, "Why do not the LNER get on with the electrification of the Great Northern suburban section and scrap those smut-belching, puffing billies?" Well, as it happened, 3 years previously, a train running through Totteridge and Whetstone had demonstrated an unexpected turn of speed. On the morning of the 20th of June 1924, the 8:44 to King's Cross approached the station as usual. At this time, the station was just called Totteridge. I mention that purely because if I don't, someone in the comments will. The driver, who was appropriately named Barnet, closed the regulator. This should have slowed the train down prior to the brakes being applied. The controls on a steam locomotive can be temperamental. Speaking from personal experience, it sometimes feels more like you're making a gentle suggestion to the locomotive than actually operating it. The engine hauling this train was one of the relatively new N2 class, and these engines had an unfortunate quirk. They were fitted with condensing pipes, which allowed waste steam to be discharged back into the water tanks. But what happened when they slowed down too suddenly was that the water sloshed back into the condensing pipes, basically reversing the entire system. I'm sure an engineer could tell you more, I'm just a guy on YouTube. But anyway, that's more or less what happened here. A blowback occurred. Steam, smoke and flames blasted into the cab. This can be deadly. Fortunately for driver Barnet and fireman Bowles, they were able to avoid the worst of it and scrambled off the footplate. They found themselves hanging onto the side of the engine for dear life. Now the crowded rush-hour train had no one at the controls and no way to safely get to them. It began to pick up speed. It accelerated through Totteridge without stopping. Soon the engine was going far faster than usual, and it began to bounce. Barnet couldn't hold on any longer. His grip slipped and he fell onto the embankment, hitting his head in the process. The train raced through Woodside Park. Doubtless the train's predicament had been noted, but there was nothing much that could be done. The train was full of passengers. Derailing was not an option. Nor was there any means of remotely stopping the train. The only hope was that it might run out of steam. It wasn't much of a hope, though. The N2s were big engines. Fireman Bowles, still just about hanging on to the bucking locomotive, knew that they wouldn't have time for that. It was rush hour. He knew for a fact that the trains operated 2 stops apart. Since his engine had decided to skip the last 2 stops, it would soon be catching up with the equally packed train ahead. If the train couldn't be brought back under control before Church End, now Finchley Central, the end result would be carnage. There was only one man who had the slightest hope of saving the day, and unfortunately for Bowles, it was him. He hauled himself back into the cab, shielding himself as best he could from the scalding steam. He closed the regulator completely and slammed the brakes hard on. The engine came to a halt at Nether Street Bridge, just short of where West Finchley Station is now. Bowles was the hero of the hour, and he managed to escape his ordeal largely unscathed. Driver Barnet was hospitalised for concussion, but he too made a full recovery. The grateful passengers raised £40 10 shillings by way of a present to Bowles, which he shared with Barnet. This would be about £2,050 today, so they were very grateful. Of course, bravery and self-sacrifice did not stop the passengers from complaining about the service in general, which was pretty terrible, if not life-threatening, usually. Eventually, they would get their wish in the 1940s when the line was taken over by the London Underground and electrified. While there are still plenty of reminders of the steam age on this branch line, fortunately the fear of being burned alive by a runaway train is not one of them. Well, I hope you enjoyed this scalding tale from the tube. If so, please do leave a like and subscribe if you'd like some more. I would like, as always, to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the dead man's switch to my driverless train. And I'll see you all again very soon. Cheerio.